a stereotype right now that like in crypto it's for criminals, it's for like risk takers. It's basically you just go in there and you lose your money. And that there is some moniker of truth to that because people are getting scammed. Some people get rich, but only if you're in it early. It's basically working like a modern day Ponzi scheme. we just want to say, what do you really lose when you remove formal education? You lose the social aspect, because the social adaptation of when you're going to school, you learn how to act in the sense of group dynamics. You learn that as part of a society. And yes, you may have this in like the practice schools that you have, but the approach you have towards practice and the approach you have towards actual learning is different. And that's why, for example, when you have a review center, students in a conventional school and a review center treat the learning process completely differently. For example, like, you know how to manage your time in theory, but do you actually do it? And that is the difference that you have in like formal education, is that you learn how to do it, and not just how to do it, but how to make it your own. It's not just individuals who are doing this. It's not just the companies who are paying influencers. It's also the media doing this. For example, Squid Game token was shielded so hard by the media because the prices keep rising and rising because of the meme-ness of Squid Game at the time, that it got people to buy the coin, and they lost all their money because even the news outlets are trying to push these coins as the greatest new thing to be in investing. And through the regulation, we should be able to regulate how news media also can report on these cryptocurrencies, just as how they report on stocks. Okay, there's also like the exploitability claim of like Tether, which is another stable coin, but they claim to be one-to-one backed by their reserves. So their promise is every coin you give us is worth $1. So you give us $1, we give you 1 Tether. But the problem is, because of how Tether was working, they basically had an infinite money printer. Instead of destroying the coin that they have, they gave it back to, they basically used it to buy more Bitcoin. Basically, the coin was worthless at that point, and they used it to buy more Bitcoin, creating an infinite money printer. So with regulation, just how central banks keeps up the level of reserves for individual banks and have them submit reports every single day of how much is in the reserves, how much withdrawals did they have. You could also do this for backed stable coins to make sure that they're actually backed and people do have their money. So the idea that people are inherently good is supplemented by the concept that they're always going to be redeemable, that deep down on the inside, there is an aspect of that person that is good and is just trying to do well for themselves. What does this look like in the context of religion? It positions goodness as something closer to the person rather than something external to them. Instead of like going towards a goal that you do not know, you are slowly removing these bad parts from yourself, bringing you back to that original innately good self that you are. Why do people mainly join religions? Because they want to go to a good place when they die, when they want to feel like their life means something. It's to actualize themselves, and it can also be to redeem themselves for the bad things they've done. If you show that people are just flawed, then people lose their redeemability, because no matter what they do, they can just label themselves and give up and tell themselves that they're like, oh, I'm just destined to be bad, I'm bad to the bone or something. This leads to the idea, so with the belief that people are inherently good, this leads to the idea of being restored, being whole, and being like a work in progress to remove the dirt that the world has thrown on you, because you are a good person, but the world has made you into a bad person because of how it has like kept you in its system. So therefore, that you can see that people are going to be more redeemable, because you can tell them that the world has made you like this, you are not like this, you don't have to give up on yourself. First reason, there's less burden on the everyman to pay. You're probably going to need to raise taxes to be able to pay off the debt. In response to the starting democracy, people will feel more freedom to be able to live life more freely under this transition. They'd be able to access certain things that maybe were limited to the authoritarian regime. Maybe be able to get have the money a little bit more equitably managed among the citizens, which is going to free up a lot of their time, free up some of their money, and probably maybe with the stability of the economy also raise their wages. This means that they're also going to have the freedom to be able to spend their money where they want. And if taxes are as bad as LO tries to say, then this would be better, as we would not heavily tax the people, which would be a net good in the people's eyes, because they're thinking that they're already this deeply in debt. So, and they also need to be able to rebuild the country, because of course they come from the authoritarian regime. So this is how this is one of the ways you'll be able to gain the hearts of the people to say that yes, this democracy is good, and that this democracy is going to be better for them as individuals. Next is that you make the country way more vulnerable to the authoritarian return. Let's take 2 examples. For example, one, Germany in World War I, with their war debts, they needed to rebuild and they needed to repay all their debts because they were busy fighting the war. And their solution to this, because of their massive amounts of debt, is to print money, which destroyed the economy, because an entire stack of money would be required for one loaf of bread, because that's how much money they had to print out to be able to pay their debts, because they were broke because of the war. This caused some issues with German society, with people wanting to transition over to a different currency, which this leading to a giant uproar in society, which leads to the rise of Hitler and the German Reich. College tuition prices are skyrocketing across the US, so that even those parents who are very prepared and think about their child's education at by the time that they think of having a child in the first place, they've been saving up for their child's education ever since they were born. This is still not enough, because the skyrocketing prices of college tuition is not cannot keep up with the rate of normal savings that an average American household can have. So much that only the very wealthy are able to afford paying for college without even marginal student loans. So even slightly more middle class and upper middle class families have this debt, even if it is lesser than the complete student loans that, for example, someone from the lower classes would have. This means that it is making education way less accessible for people. It is making the professional sector very inaccessible. Therefore, that if it is the government's job to be able to solve this, because of course they want to be able to have more workers. We want to remove the structural barrier. Student loan debt interest rates are based on the credit score of the student and the co-signer of the loan. Higher credit means lower interest rates. How do you even get a good credit score in the US? You need to be able to have a credit card. One, have banks trust you with a credit card, use it regularly, and being able to pay it off regularly and make big enough purchase to be able to raise your credit score. That means poorer families have a harder time accessing this. So no loans, and scholarships in the US are also very extracurricular based, meaning that those who are in need of money and are working cannot have those money through extracurriculars. Languages hold so much more than just plain text. It encompasses their way of life, how they see the world. For example, Japan did not have a word to differentiate the colors of blue and green, because for the people who developed that language back in Japan, they both represented the same thing, which is nature, which is the sky, which is the grass around them. So therefore, they did not create a word for this in the Filipino language. The word for snow, which is nieve, comes from Spanish, a culture who has experienced it, but the Filipino people otherwise would not have experienced it without the colonization of the Spanish. So therefore, the experiences of the people shape the way how their language is made. For example, the Filipino word kilig has no equivalent translations, and you can describe what Schadenfreude is in like in English, but you cannot fully encompass its whole meaning. Writing is new to human history, so there are many things that are passed down orally, but you need to know the language to be able to comprehend. And as I said earlier, you cannot fully encompass the thoughts and sentiments of these passed down languages through merely the English translations that you can get. Writing, like basically, yes, the written language is important, but there are other things that are not written down. You're not just creating the death of a language, but also the death of the content and the death of the culture that it belongs to. What is the point of chanting something meant to revere something else when you don't even know what this means? There is no significance to just spouting out gibberish because you think that this is just what we've done. And so you do need to know the background, the culture, to be able to fully appreciate what things that you're doing with your culture. We can see obviously from many different countries around the world that money gets you votes, which can pay for more ad campaigns, which you can boost your social media posts, which you can like get your name out there basically, or in the worst case, just buy votes with the money that you have. Politicians are usually those who come from wealthy families, political dynasties, or privileged backgrounds. Not necessarily like all the time, but this is a majority of cases that they come from other families that have already had a history in politics, that they come from just areas of life where, like, yes, they may be able to understand like the masses, but it is very rare to have someone who actually has the funds to be able to rise up to that position. Understanding that politician is limited by their spending capacity allows the people to choose the people that they want to put in positions of power. They would have the agency to do that. They don't just vote with their actual vote, but also take part in the campaign process if they have the money to spare. This would not just remove volunteerism efforts. Like, of course, we're still gonna have volunteers. We can have people still go door to door and talk to people about like their political ideologies. But this gives an additional opportunity to be involved in the process. What does being involved in the process actually like you give money, right? But like, why does being more involved in the process matter? It goes on to like my fourth layer. It would bring more scrutiny to how candidates act during the campaign period. When people work hard for their money and use it to purchase something, they would be very critical about the function of the item. If my parents gave me a random pen to use and it starts leaking and spits out ink, I wouldn't like it, but I would really fault it because I wasn't the one who spent on it, and I'm just using it. But if I buy with my own money some pens from Shopee and the ink is horrible, then of course I'm going to be very, very critical of that because I spent my hard-earned cash. I spent like my time basically looking for it. So it would translate the same during campaigns. It would bring more scrutiny to candidates you give your money to, because you are now more aware of what are they doing with your money rather than just the money that they have and are losing.